Keith, what do you do in your spare time?
I come to Arkestro user conferences.
That's good, that's good. What's up?
Spend under prediction.
Spend under prediction. Excellent. I didn't learn that with Edmunds. No. Hey, we're excited to be here. I've got some questions for Keith. We're going to just kind of have fun with this, and then I also have some questions from the audience that I've taken down. So the first one, Keith, the Nobel Peace Prize, which I know is a dream that you never knew you had, all about the trust doctrine. Can you just talk about that? And it was the work at the State Department. Give the audience a little bit of a flavor for how that went and how you really worked with Taiwan and produced economic security for the world.
Well, I think, as a lifelong businessman, I never thought I was going to go into government. I mean, I've been blessed with the American dream. So when I was running DocuSign, we were up to about 500 million users and headed off to one country that we didn't have a presence in, that was China. I've been going to China since 1981. I'm a lover of Chinese history, culture, the people, certainly the food. But this time it was different. I could see the General Secretary Xi, head of the Chinese Communist Party, turned market competition into a new form of aggression. I could see their drone swarm technology. I saw a lot of technology when I was over there. And as I'm coming back on the plane, I go, all I know is the guys with the best technology win the war, and these guys are up to no good. I wonder what the guys in Washington think about it. So I went out to Washington, really didn't know anybody in government. Next thing you know, I got asked to run U.S. economic diplomacy. And my mission was to develop and operationalize a global economic security strategy to drive economic growth, maximize national security, and combat China's economic aggression. I go, well, that's a little different mission than what I'm used to. And I brought in just some great talent from Silicon Valley, combine it with the foreign service officers. And, one of our urgent missions was to defeat China's master plan to control 5G. 5G is more than just smartphones, power systems, utility grids, Internet of Things, manufacturing processes. And that's when we created the trust doctrine. And what the trust doctrine is all about, it's to counter China's power principle of intimidation, retaliation, coercion, and co-option. My first 60 bilaterals with my foreign counterparts, foreign ministers, economic ministers, I say, hey, how's your relationship with China? And they go, well, they're an important trading partner. But then they look both ways. It almost seems like it happened every time. Like somebody's in the room, they go, but we don't trust them. And that rang bells in my head because just a year before, at DocuSign user conference, I said, we're not in the software business, we're in the trust business. Trust is the most important word in any language. It's the basis for every relationship, personal, business, or otherwise. And you buy from people you trust. You buy from people you trust. You do business with people you trust. You love people you trust. And so we made that as part of the doctrine. And the trust principles are things that protect our freedoms, like integrity, reciprocity, transparency, respect for rule of law, respect for property, respect for sovereignty of nations, respect for the environment, respect for human rights. And these are things that we honor, but authoritarian regimes don't. And so that's what we used to accomplish our mission.
That's terrific. So if you look back and you saw a little bit on the video over the years, really transforming lots of different industries, robotics, design synthesis, design automation, e-commerce, of course, with Ariba, and most recently, kind of diplomacy, which was sort of this idea of tech statecraft. And now taking that to the Krach Institute at Purdue, we're sitting here at Arkestro. It was interesting that the trust that you just talked about was linked into Edmund's talk as well. It all comes down to that. But we're seeing another paradigm shift in technology right here, And I just was wondering what you think about the industry and the opportunity that you see for Arkestro.
Yeah, well, I think Arkestro is on its way to achieving great escape velocity. And it's got the 5 key ingredients that make a company really successful. The first one is leadership. When you look at these veterans from Edmund, Rob DeSantis, Scott Stein, Magner, Tom Palak, Paul Claudier, all these guys have the pattern recognition, and they've done it before. And that leads to the second one. They've developed a great culture. And if you go walking around talking to the Arkestro guys, you're going to see a lot of high fives, a lot of bear hugs, maybe a few belly laughs. And that's what really motivates people and drives people, and that's what attracts great technologists. And that's the third one, is tremendous technology in terms of incorporating behavioral science and machine learning and game theory all into one. So this is a big paradigm shift, and that leads to a tremendous value proposition for their customers. And by the way, it's not just cost savings, it's not just cycle time savings. It gets down to risk reduction. And I love what Edmund put in one of his papers, where he said, the least cost, the least expensive supplier, it's not the low cost one, it's less risky one. And I think that's important. And so that value proposition brings that power back to the procurement organization, which it's kind of gotten dispersed with the self-serve apps. And so for procurement folks, it gets you promoted. That's the ultimate value proposition. And then that leads to great customers. You can really see the enthusiasm.
Absolutely. So kind of along those lines, we've kidded in the past about the playbook and repeating kind of consistent principles when you've run organizations in the past. And that playbook, we ran it back in the robotics business at RASNA, at Ariba at Purdue University, even at the State Department. And I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, the playbook is just a framework to maintain alignment as you scale. And Arkestro will scale significantly. At Ariba, we were doubling our revenue and our number of employees quarter over quarter for 12 quarters in a row. Back then, it was the fastest growing software company in the world. So keeping people aligned, you do that with, it's like a pyramid, and it's vision, mission, values, team rules, long-term goals, strategy, all boiled down to execution. And it always comes down to execution, because you could have the greatest strategy in the world, but if you can't execute, you're going to lose every time. You could have an okay strategy, and you could out-execute everybody else, and you're going to win. And, that's what I see here at Arkestro. Great executors.
That's great. So one of the things that stuck with me, and it's sort of part of the playbook, but the need for open, honest communication, how important it is for people to see the team is more important as themselves, mission-driven. And I know at the early days of Ariba, and a lot of the organization, there's a lot of demonstrations of this. Do you have any examples of that you can think of?
Yeah, and I think this comes down to team culture. In that playbook, we had 5 team rules, and the 5th one was the most important one. And that is, hire the best people, especially if they're better than us. And I'll never forget, in the early days of Ariba, we had about 60 people in the company. Every Friday, we'd do a roundtable. Anybody could speak and say anything that was on their mind. And one of the founders, we had 7 founders, and one of them, a guy named Bobby Lint, who was our VP of marketing, stands up and he goes, "This opportunity is way bigger than I ever imagined. And Ariba is going to is so much more successful than I could have ever dreamed of." Citing team rule number 5, hire the best people, especially if they're better than ourselves. I'm going to step aside, run partnerships, and we should go hire a world-class VP of marketing. And you could see the jaws drop around the room. Now, there was a guy who came after him. He was about a 24-year-old guy. His name was Guy Haskin, as a matter of fact. And he goes, "Bobby, I just came from a Silicon Valley startup company. And if one guy would have had the courage, and it's going to go bankrupt any day." And he goes, "If one guy would have had the courage that you had, we could have gone to the moon." And that kind of set that tone, story after story. And Rob DeSantis did it again too, where he's running sales and knocking down, first it was a $500,000 deal, then $1 million, $3 million, and we got up to about $4 million deals. And he goes, Keith, I think I should head to Europe. We should hire somebody who's, done this before. I go, Rob, but you're the best VP of sales I've ever seen in my life. I go, who are you going to get? The VP of North American Sales at SAP or something like that? Okay, if you do that, then you could go to Europe. And he goes, okay, and I want my quote at $2 million, and I want to have Greg Cruz, my application engineer, and I want to bring this gal over as secretary. I go, fine, you find that person. Well, we hired a VP of North American Sales. Rob goes over to Europe, and, I'd call him up, every morning as I'm coming into work. How you doing? Oh, I'm working on one. And it's like 4 months into it, he goes, we got our first customer in Europe. I go, who is it? He goes, North American Sales. Like, oh, that's really a good customer. How much is it worth? He goes, $10 million. That's Rob, right? So you see those kind of examples all the time, and selfless examples, and it's all about the team. And to build that high-performance team, you need to have a noble mission. Of course, you need to have an enemy that stops the water cooler talk. Particularly in business world, I always pick paper because there's a lot of it and doesn't punch back. But anyway, and then you've got to have a plan.
That's great. And execute against the plan.
And execute on a plan.
So let's go back to State Department stuff. So as the E at the State Department, environment, energy, and economy, you were responsible for looking after global supply chains.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. One of the areas I was responsible for was infectious diseases. So when COVID hit, we repatriated 100,000 U.S. citizens while the flight stopped and brought in 2 billion pieces of PPE. They actually all came from China because China knew about the virus in mid-2019. They bought up all the PPE around the world and cranked up their production. And we could see it was kind of like just draining the water. You could see where all these different supply chains were coming from China, and it put it at great risk. And they actually used that as leverage against the United States, against a lot of countries. In other words, they say, hey, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're not going to get any masks, no thermometers, none of the machines, anything. So I saw Edmund's slide where it said the world is changing. The world has changed. And so that's one of the things I love about Arkestro is it gives you such visibility into that supply chain, and you're able to see those risky suppliers.
So do you think this is going to be fun or scary fun?
Well, there's no doubt about it. When you're building a company, it's always scary fun, right? Because you have ups and downs and things going all around, all that.
Where did you come up with that? Scary fun. We've heard that before.
Well, we've always said that, but the guy who taught me scary fun is my middle son, Carter, because I'll never forget where, at the roller coaster, Santa Cruz Boardwalk, and he was about 5 years old. He was terrified of roller coasters. But his older brother loved it. So finally we talked him into going, right? So I'm sitting next to Carter. We're going up that big hill, click, 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 click. His older brother's sitting in the thing ahead of us, looking back at Carter going, Carter, you're going to die, you're going to die. And I'm going like I'm the worst dad in the world. And you go down that thing, he's screaming his head off, you go whipping all those turns. I go, oh my God, he's yelling for his mom, all kinds of stuff. And we come to a screeching halt, and look at him. And he goes, Dad, that was scary fun. Can we do it again? So, these guys are doing it again.
That's awesome. So why do you love procurement so much?
Well, it's because of people, right? And when I think of all those days at Ariba, and then, you're always dealing with procurement people when you're in an enterprise software business, made some great relationships. And, because it is a people business. That's really what it amounts to.
It gets back to the trust principles.
Yeah, it's all back to the trust principle. because as procurement professionals, it's all about building trust. You've got to work really close with those suppliers. And, not everybody can be trusted. I penned an article in Fortune last April that said, present your China contingency plan at the next board meeting. So with Putin's invasion of Russia, where 300 companies had to pull out entirely out of Russia, they lost hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, board of directors are demanding from their CEOs a China contingency plan because a board member's fiduciary duty to their shareholders is to mitigate risk. So, when you're on a board, you have your plan on the shelf in case like there's a cyber breach. Well, this is equally as important because Xi has cracked down on the private sector. There's potential conflict in Taiwan. There's 500 million people are locked down in China because of extreme COVID things. So now the boards are demanding it. And how it works is the CEO then goes, all right, I'm going to go to my EVPs, I'm going to my sales guys, I'm going to financial guys, I'm going to the supply chain guys. Where are we exposed? And those put together those chapters in that China contingency plan. And then the CEO presents that to the board. And it's not like a shareholder vote where people raise it, they just nod their head. And then smart CEO begin to execute on it because he knows if he waits until some kind of conflict breaks out or something, things get nationalized, those kind of things, it'll be too late.
Now, how does that manifest in endowments and investments and all of that? That seems to be a little interrelated.
Yeah, it is a little bit interrelated because not only are supply chains being pulled out of China, but so is investment. Because, and I think we did a lot of work on this at the State Department because the average U.S. Citizen is unknowingly financing China's surveillance capabilities, which is enabling the genocide in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, also enabling their military buildup. And so, and how's that done? Well, these Chinese companies, first of all, they break in an unnatural amount of subsidiaries to kind of conceal what these companies are. They get buried in these index funds, like the MSCI index fund, and then they go into like BlackRock's 431 emerging market funds, and then those get buried into the $11.7 trillion pension funds or insurance funds or university endowments. And I think that was one of the, and China needs that hard currency. So that was one of the missions.
So the U.S. is funding these companies.
Yeah.
And wasn't the U.S. military retirement actually investing?
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah. This is called TSP. This is a pension fund for all federal workers and our men and women in the military. And that was one of the first dominoes that dropped. They said we're not going to be invested in China. And that's a big deal now. I wrote a letter to every CEO in the country when I was under Secretary of State, all the university governing boards, and now it's created a movement by a group called Athena, a protest divestment movement.
And they're having some success, it sounds like.
Really, yeah, they're having great success. They're on like 30 campuses, and and it's very similar to the anti-apartheid movement way back when, South Africa.
So I've got a couple questions that came from the audience. One was, what do you think C-suites get wrong when it comes to digital procurement?
Well, I think one of the things that's happened over time is that it got so much self-service that it's kind of spread out a little too much. And so they've lost a lot of the strategic nature of it. And the procurement area is such a critical part when it comes to the digital transformation to be able to speed up business. And when you're undergoing a digital transformation, it's really a cultural transformation. And I think the best advice I could give to the audience is that when you're implementing Arkestro, it's go big or go home. Because you want to make that commitment up front. But also when you implement it, go for the quick wins, right? When you're looking at those different use cases, when you're going out there, because the quick wins give you momentum. And that's what you really want to be able to show from a culture standpoint.
Got it. Here's another question around global. What are the global issues around technology today?
Yeah, well, the global issues around that is it's all about trust. So what technology can you trust? And technology can be used for good or for evil purposes. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue with one of the guys I brought out to the State Department who's going to be the next president of Purdue. And it's all about that technology must advance freedom. So if you look at what China's done, it's literally the 1984 Orwellian state. And what they're doing is they're exporting that around the world. They're literally exporting dictator out of the box. And it also manifests itself over here in the U.S. They have I call it the great one-way China firewall, where all the data comes in for their own use, but none goes out. And reciprocally, all their propaganda goes out, but the truth does not come in. And they have extended that great firewall on applications like TikTok and all that. If your kids are using TikTok and they download that, the Chinese can see literally every keystroke that you're making, whether you're in the application or not, and they're grabbing all that data, and they look at that as a weapon.
So talk a little bit about that, because there's a mandate in the laws with the Communist Party in terms of sharing of data, and that's kind of the base of that.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me to see over the years. I grew up in Ohio. My dad had a 5-person machine shop in the good days, and the tough times it was just me and him. And I saw how the weapons of mass production have just gutted the heart of our economic engine. And when I was out in Silicon Valley, I could also see the Chinese. And at Ariba, Alibaba stole a bunch of our intellectual property. And, it was interesting. A couple years later, I went over there, and I talked to I said, "What are you guys going to stop stealing our intellectual property?" And they just kind of giggled. And they just said, "We don't really have a word for steal in Chinese." He goes, if it's there, we take it. It's your guys' fault for not protecting it. And that's why Arkestro security is so key. And what I didn't know, as a CEO at DocuSign, that China has a thing called the National Intelligence Act that requires any Chinese company, state-owned or otherwise, and any Chinese person to turn over any information, proprietary technology, data, upon request to the Chinese Communist Party or the PRC, which is the same. And if you don't, you suffer the consequences. You're going to go to prison, or if you're here in the States, your grandma's going to go. And I didn't know that, and that really changes a lot of the behavior. I'll never forget. This is when I was under Secretary of State. I came back to my home in San Francisco, and I had a dinner with 36 of the top Silicon Valley CEOs. You recognize all their names, and it was a safe environment. And I said, most of those guys have been there before. And I said, let's go around the room, tell your favorite China horror story. And I'll tell you, it was enlightening. I can't say specifics, but it was enlightening, it was cathartic, and it was frightening all in one. And at the end, stood up and we said, hey, in Silicon Valley, we say corporate responsibility, social responsibility. It's also national security and global economic security too. Because not only is the Chinese Communist Party a real and urgent threat to our democracy, but it's a real and urgent threat to your businesses, because they don't want to just compete, they want to put you out of business.
So let me circle back around to Arkestro. What excites you about the future, the business impact that Arkestro is going to have in the world? It does. There's a feeling. I know we were together many years ago at the Fairmount in San Jose, which was the first meeting like this that we had with then a company called ProcureSoft that became Ariba.
Right.
And then you fast forward, and we were at downtown San Francisco at the Sir Francis Drake with a group like this when DocuSign kind of kicked off.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're here. Here it goes again.
It's like deja vu all over again, because it is really the right solution for a critical problem that's just come up. And you know, and what's enabled that is a paradigm shift in technology when you look at all the technologies in terms of machine learning. So this is going to be revolutionary. And I mean, for me, it's and you and a lot of the guys here at Arkestro, we all worked together for so many years. It's pattern recognition, and this is going to be a big wave that's going to be ridden, and it's actually critical to global economic security, and it's critical to our national security in the United States. You know, I was talking with Martin from Germany. It's critical for countries' freedom to maintain that freedom, because you need that transparency, and you need to be able to trust your suppliers.
Yeah. You know, we had a dinner last night. This is a little bit unrelated, but we were sitting with Bob from Great Dane.
Yeah.
And I said the food here is better than at the real Eiffel Tower.
And less expensive.
And he said it's because it's delivered to the Paris Hotel on Great Dane equipment. So I thought that was kind of cool. That brought it home. Well, this is amazing, Keith. Any final thoughts or things that you'd like to share with the audience? Or
well, you know, I guess the thing is, as I look out in the crowd, I just want to thank all the Arkestro customers and soon to be Arkestro customers, because I know before whoever's not a customer will be DocuSigning an order before they leave tonight. But really, you know, this team of people here is all part of the extended virtual Arkestro family. And this is going to be a great foundation to build something big and really make a big change in the world. And Lord knows we need it. We need it in our supply chains. They're more critical than ever before. We need it in terms of building partnerships around the world with our allies. And, you know, one of the big things that we did at the State Department is we onshored Taiwan Semiconductor Company. They're the most important foreign company to United States national security. That was one of our missions. It was the largest onshoring in history, $12 billion. And we were trying to get Intel, Micron, and Samsung. Now they've all followed. Now it's $350 billion. Now have onshored. So things are going to be changing really fast. And when things change really fast, what's the most important thing? You've got to be able to predict where you're going. And so this is going to be an essential solution for all of you. So anyway, it's an honor to be here. Great to see all of you. And thanks, Marc. It's always good to be with you.
Thank you, Keith.
All right, thanks.
All right.